Welcome to the Power Table. If you are leading your business with a big vision and you're ready for your visibility to match your ambition, you are in the right place. I'm your host, Taylor Smith, founder of the Power Table, serial entrepreneur, and international keynote speaker. I've generated millions in my business through speaking, personal branding, and community building, and I'm here to teach you how to do the same as a founder-led brand. Each week, we dive into the business strategies, identity, and leadership work required to become the woman people recognize, trust, and choose again and again. Because your next level isn't just about what you do, it's about who you become in the process. This is your seat at the table. Power Table! Does it feel like the advice online is to build your personal brand, to grow your business, and get visible, but no one ever really describes how to do that? And maybe the back end of that to you feels very chaotic, messy, and a bit unclear. If you've ever felt like you were showing up online consistently, but the message itself, who you are, what you do, what you want to be known for, it still feels scattered, unclear, or every single time that you're a podcast guest or you go to create a piece of content, it feels like you're starting from scratch every single time. If that has been the case for you, this episode is for you. The foundation of a strong personal brand is clarity. And that clarity gets lost when your ideas are spread across 15 different apps, half-finished Google Docs, notes in your phone, and anywhere else that you might have jotted down messaging and content ideas, instead of them all being anchored in one place. Welcome back to the Power Table podcast. I'm very excited to share this episode with you and talk about how you can solve this problem, how to create your own personal brand and messaging and media hub so that all of this can live in one cohesive, easy to access space, whether you are a solopreneur or you want your team to be able to reference and understand your personal brand clearly. So in this episode, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I do that. But before we get there, I want to set the stage with what the problem is with all of these 15 different places in the half-finished Google Docs. And I see this all the time because entrepreneurs will ask me for tips on how to grow their personal brand. They'll say, I'm creating the content, I'm posting, I'm showing up on podcasts, I'm trying to get speaking gigs, or maybe I've even done a few of them. And yet also it feels like my messaging changes by the day. If I got really honest with myself, I would tell you that my content doesn't actually connect to my offers and I'm not sure what to say in post versus my podcasts, versus my speaking applications, versus my actual talks and workshops that I give. And maybe you felt this way. This is what people often tell me. And it starts to feel like you're telling yourself, I'm doing all the right things. I'm taking all the advice. So why isn't it clicking? And why do I still personally feel confused about what my North Star actually is? If you felt this way, maybe you couldn't quite put it into words before this episode. I promise you, this is very normal to be this confused. And it's not that you have a lack of good ideas or a lack of the ability to clearly market and sell yourself. It's a lack of organization and a lack of defined set of ideas and that North Star that guides all of your assets in one place, such as content, talks, what you would speak onto the media, what you would speak onto podcasts, what you would teach in other people's communities, and the workshops that you would lead. And so I want to introduce you to something that has completely changed how I create content, how I show up on stages and podcasts, media features, and how I built my personal brand. And that is that I created a personal brand messaging and media hub that is specific to me. And this is not another random doc, and it is not an AI tool that just understands my voice and has been trained on my content for captions. We're going to talk later in this episode on why a custom AI chatbot is not what you need for your personal brand. But my personal brand hub is a centralized, structured, intentional living document where my thought leadership lives. Think of it like a corporate brand guide or the brand guide that you're given by a professional graphic designer when they create your logos and they create your brand guide. But this is for you personally, how you're going to show up as the founder of your business who has a personal brand. And what I've seen is that we're often really good at creating these kind of structures and documents for other areas of our business, such as operations, client onboarding and offboarding, finances, or content calendars. But then when it comes to your own thought leadership, and your own personal brand assets, it's often a little bit more intangible. So they end up being more disorganized and lost more often than not. And then the result of that is lost opportunities and a continued struggle with clarity. And that's why this is important and why this has been such a game changer for me. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how I created my personal brand hub inside of a tool called PDF Spaces, which is one of the many helpful tools inside Adobe Acrobat Studio, and how this workflow has really changed the game for me. And before I share with you exactly how this works, I want to share that I am an Adobe Acrobat ambassador, which means I partner with Adobe and I get to share the tools that I genuinely use in my business. I wouldn't share something that I don't already use. So PDF Spaces is one of the tools that me and my team use all the time. And I'm not just sharing this because it's just another platform, it's just a different AI tool, but I'm sharing it because it's part of my workflow inside of Acrobat, inside my personal brand that has fundamentally changed how I organize my ideas, how I prepare for visibility opportunities. It's helped me pitch for media features and how I actually show up with clarity, certainty, and confidence across my brand. So we're going to break this down in a way that you can not only understand, but you can actually try and implement for yourself. And really quickly, I want to explain what a PDF space is actually inside of Adobe Acrobat Studio, because this is where my personal brand hub lives. A PDF space is a centralized, organized productivity and creativity hub where anything that's a PDF, such as documents or assets, can all live together in one place. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we have a little bit of a visual and an overlay so that you can see this. So if you're listening to this podcast, you want to see how Adobe Acrobat Studio and PDF Spaces actually looks and works, go listen and watch this episode of the podcast on YouTube specifically. So instead of having your ideas all scattered across a bunch of different tools like the Notes app and the Docs and the random folders. Instead, you are bringing everything into this one cohesive space that is easy to navigate, easy to update, and actually easy to use with built-in AI tools. And it turns all these ideas from a collection of scattered thoughts into something that feels like a real tangible asset. It looks professional, it is easy to use, and builds that strong foundation and structural element to your personal brand that you might be missing. So inside of my hub, I upload everything that is a key asset to who I am as the founder of my brand. And I can upload inside of PDF Spaces anything that is in PDF format. So for me, the things that are in my hub are my core messaging and positioning. I have a story bank. So this is my signature stories that I come back to again and again. And so these are stories from my business growth, from my personal life. And I use these stories over and over again in media interviews, in talks, in podcast episodes. So just to give you an example of that, I highly recommend that you do build a story bank. But just to give you an example, I often share the story about how I grew the Power Table community and how I would sit in a coffee shop alone hosting events when no one came and I had to choose to keep going. And here we are 3 years later with sold out rooms of hundreds of women. So having those stories is incredibly helpful for having a strong and clear defined personal brand. I also have uploaded into that PDF space my speaking topics, signature frameworks, my slide decks from all my current best talks and workshops, media angles and bios. So I have my full media kit uploaded in there, as well as all of my past media features and articles. So I've downloaded these from the media outlet's website. So for example, with a magazine, I will print the whole web page as a PDF and then upload that PDF into my PDF space. And then also I have a breakdown, like a PDF breakdown of what are all my offers in my business? How do I talk about them? Who are they for? Who's the target audience for this? And then I do also like for my PDF space to have a little bit more context too on how I create content so that if I want to use it for content idea generation, I can. So I have included PDFs of my top performing LinkedIn posts, my Instagram carousel posts with text captions and caption templates. And one more quick point on this that I want to make is that the AI assistant inside of PDF Spaces can read anything that is in text format. So it can read graphics such as your Instagram carousel graphics that have text on them, but it can't interpret information from photos or videos. So just making sure that you include the text version or the captions or things like that is the way that it can successfully read your content. And I want to make this really practical because I don't want this to just feel like an idea that you don't take action on. I want you to actually build this. So here's how I structure the inside of my personal brand hub. I'm not creating one giant document. That's what a lot of AI tools have you do. But actually, I'm creating a hub of multiple PDFs that each serve a purpose and have a clear asset that they are providing information to AI Assistant and PDF Spaces about me and my personal brand. So inside of that PDF space, the easiest place to start would be 4 primary documents, although you can upload so many more. But one would be your core messaging, mission statement, value statement, belief statement, positioning. What do you want to be known for? Why do you do what you do? Anything you probably already have established about your brand and you personally as a founder. And then one should be your story bank, or at the very least, one single story. What is the origin story of why you do what you do? But ideally, you probably have a whole story bank. That way, you can tie your stories into your thought leadership. And it helps with positioning and differentiation because you're not just saying, I'm an expert in this. You're saying, here's the story behind why I'm an expert or how my expertise created this change in my community or my clients' lives. This really will be relevant for the future and also is just relevant overall for you to have more certainty and confidence in your personal brand if you understand your differentiation. And then if you have speaking topics, questions you want to answer on podcasts, unique frameworks, questions you want to be asked in the media, I like to put those in one PDF as well. And then from there, media assets, your media kit. If you have this in PDF format, I would upload that into your PDF space. So that would be long and short bios, angles, any past features, really describing who you are and your experience and expertise to the media or to event hosts, podcast hosts, things like that. That professional bio speaker kit or media kit would be also something I would upload. And then optional, but highly recommended would be to create additional PDFs of all your past media features, all your best performing past posts, blog posts, podcast episodes you've written that have done really, really well, anything like that, and make separate PDFs for all of those. And why you do this is so that the next time you go to create content, you go to prep for a podcast, to pitch yourself for the media, to build a talk, we're no longer starting from scratch or a place of half-finished chaos. And instead, you get to open the hub, say directly to AI Assistant, hey, I want to pitch this talk and I need to include this story, or I need to prep for this podcast. What are some of the stories I could tell? What are some questions that I could practice and prep answers for based on this topic that I've already shared with you? Another very cool feature is that PDF Spaces can actually summarize all of your documents. It can summarize content for you and save you a lot of time instead of you scrolling through content to find past ideas. And that's the whole workflow. Everything lives in one place. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel every time I want to go create something or talk to someone, or I'm prepping for a media or podcast opportunity, I'm not feeling like I'm starting from scratch or staring at a blank screen, knowing I need to prepare, but also not knowing what I need to do. And instead, I'm pulling from my clearest source of truth for my personal brand. And honestly, this became much more important in my business once I started doing a lot more speaking, media interviews, podcasts, brand partnerships. And I needed to now constantly answer journalists, send people my speaking topics quickly, and easily create media pitches or speaking pitches or respond to people when they asked, hey, can you come on my podcast and what are your topics? I could do that much faster once I created a single hub for my personal brand that had all of these assets in one place, and it just became easier to do and faster. And not only that, but my team can access this too. So they can, if they need to know, what does Taylor speak on? What are some of the past media features? How can she respond to this media pitch? What's her thought leadership for content development? They can access all of that. And they no longer have to ask me directly. Now, at this point, I have mentioned AI Assistant a couple of times in the PDF spaces and in my personal brand hub. And I want to pause here for a second because this is really important, especially with how many people are talking about AI right now. The goal of this PDF space is not to build some kind of AI tool that understands your brand voice and can churn out captions and content that sound like you. That's where I think a lot of people are getting this wrong. They're focused on, how do I train this AI tool to sound like me? How to create a custom AI for my brand? How do I get AI to write my copy and content? But that's not actually the real problem. The real problem is that your message isn't clearly structured and organized in the first place. And when you have that problem, when you do go to use AI for those type of things, you're not going to be happy with the output. So instead of focusing on AI first, or these custom messaging bots, having it learn your voice and your brand, instead focus on building a system and a foundation of what your thought leadership is, who you are, and what you stand for as the founder of your business, that place where your ideas, your messaging, and your thought leadership are actually defined, organized, and clear. Now, once you have that hub, inside of that, then we use AI. I use AI assistant inside of Adobe Acrobat, and I've created a fully personalized AI assistant called Taylor's Personal Brand Expert. And I do ask it things like, hey, based on my story bank, can you help me generate additional content ideas that I could use for my LinkedIn account? Or I'll say, help me create content ideas from this one podcast script they already wrote. Let's take that and let's break it up into some threads posts. Or I'm working on this media request, this media interview. What stories do I have in my story bank that could fit this interview I'm already working on? Here's the context. Here's my response. Can you match it with the story I already have? And this is very important, what I'm about to say next. AI Assistant inside of Adobe Acrobat, when I prompt it like this, is pulling only from my actual body of work inside the PDF space. Unlike other open source generative AI models, where you're going to see if you put this into these other AI tools, these open AIs, it's going to pull from the entire internet and try to be as helpful as possible. And then you're left with content that either sounds like every other person on the internet, or it might not even be accurate, the output that it's giving you, because it's not really referencing your source of truth. It's just trying to be helpful and pull from everywhere it can. And that's a problem foundationally. And if you rely on these open source models too much and they don't know about you, they're not pulling only from your content, you're going to actually see a weakening of your thought leadership. And instead, AI Assistant inside of Adobe Acrobat is only pulling from the body of work that I put into the PDF space, which includes my messaging, my frameworks, my stories, my past speaking content, workshops, and social media content, anything I put in there. So instead of AI trying to be as helpful as possible on the entire internet, and therefore also subject to glazing and fluffy, overly positive content that you get from open AI models, instead, AI Assistant inside of Adobe Acrobat is generating ideas and angles, specific stories, media opportunities, and so much more based only on my thought leadership. And that creates a completely different level of depth, clarity, and alignment as a founder-led brand. And I want to tell you about one other really fun feature inside of PDF Spaces that I found incredibly valuable when it comes to building and refining your personal brand, and something I don't think a lot of people are talking about yet. And it's a way that you could use AI that maybe you haven't thought of. So inside of PDF Spaces, there are AI-generated podcast-style conversations that are created based on the documents you upload. So you upload your documents, and instead of it just producing a text-based summary, instead of just it reading your content, you can now actually listen to how this AI assistant would describe your personal brand, your messaging, and your expertise, and hear how, from that outside perspective, your expertise comes across. So inside of a PDF space, you'll see two versions of this. One is called Highlights, which is typically about a 6-minute long mini podcast about all the files you uploaded. And then the other one is called Deep Dive, which is usually about 10 to 12 minutes. And what this is essentially two AI generated podcast hosts. And mine, I don't know if there are different ones across different PDF spaces, but mine in my PDF space are automatically named Liam and Chloe, and they have a conversation about your files that you put into it. So in my case, they have a conversation about my personal brand, about my ideas, messaging, and thought leadership. And this is kind of weird, not going to lie, but actually it's so powerful because what it does is it gives you a completely different perspective. It's almost like stepping outside your business and listening in to how your big ideas would be talked about if you weren't in the room. And that creates a very powerful question for yourself. You can say, based on what I just heard, is my personal brand actually conveying what I want it to convey? Is that how I want my expertise talked about? Ooh, is that weaker than I wanted? Or that does not have the vibe that I thought it would? Is this messaging that I would want repeated? Is this the positioning I want to be known for? Because a lot of times what we think we're saying and what actually comes across are not always the same. So I will listen to these AI generated conversations, like I said, like 6 to 10 minutes as a way to audit my own topics and messaging. And then if something feels off if the messaging isn't as clear as I wanted, or it gave me a different idea, or it's not emphasizing the right thing, I'll go back to those foundational documents, refine my messaging, update my positioning, strengthen the language, and then re-upload those files into the PDF space. And what's really cool about these podcast style conversations is they auto update based on any files that you add, based on any changes that you make. So you re-upload and the podcast regenerates. So you can refine your brand and then actually hear the difference. And so I'm just going to play here in the podcast episode a short clip so that you can hear what that sounds like.
Welcome to this new episode. Today, we're diving deep into the evolving landscape of personal branding in 2025, especially for founder-led brands and women entrepreneurs. It's not just about being visible anymore. It's about building trust, authority, and community that actually drives sustainable business growth.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much the game has shifted. We're moving beyond follower counts and flashy content to something much more intentional and strategic. We'll unpack frameworks like the credibility stack and explore how identity, visibility, authority, monetization, and community all interconnect to create predictable opportunities.
Exactly. And we'll be drawing on real-world examples, especially from Taylor Smith's Power Table ecosystem, which really exemplifies how consistency and intentionality compound over time. So let's start at the foundation, clarifying your personal brand identity.
I think this is just a really cool, fun, strategic tool. And I have two important points to make on this. That is, one, we are living in a world where our brand needs to be understood well by both humans and AI in order to be visible and to see business growth. And two, if your brand cannot be clearly explained without you in the room, it's not ready for the level of visibility that you're asking for. And because I have this personal brand hub, where I've taken the time to really build out that clear structure, I'm able to have a highly consistent, in-demand, and in-depth body of work across speaking, content, and beyond, because now I no longer sit down and wonder, what should I post? I have to respond to this media interview and I have no idea what to say. I'm not trying to reinvent my marketing every week. I'm not scrambling when every new opportunity comes in and requires a quick response time. Instead, everything I create along with my team is now pulled from the same place, which means my content is more consistent, my messaging is clearer, my brand feels stronger. It cannot be replicated. And honestly, I can move so much faster. And it has made showing up feel that much easier. So if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking, okay, I am interested, I want to try this, I need this, but I'm not actually sure where to start with building out my own personal brand and messaging hub, I created something for you. I built a version of my personal brand hub that you can copy and use for yourself inside PDF Spaces so that you are not starting from scratch. And I paired it with my own personal brand audit, which walks you through exactly how to refine your messaging, your positioning, and your thought leadership as you build it out. So instead of just listening to this episode and then trying to piece it together, you can actually implement it. So you can grab the personal brand hub template at the link in the show notes below this episode. And it's also where you can check out Adobe Acrobat Studio, which is what I use to build and organize my entire hub. And you can try it for free for 7 days using the link below. And if you want to stand out and build that personal brand that gets you noticed, it's important to remember it's not about saying more. It's not about churning out more content. It's about developing your message clearly and then keeping it hyper consistent. And that only happens when your ideas have an organized, defined place to live. And when your messaging is clear, the content connects, sharpens, your voice gets stronger, and your brand becomes recognizable. And when your brand is recognizable across your industry, that's when those opportunities that you want, such as collaborations, speaking, and podcast guesting, really start to compound. And so if things have felt more scattered, unclear, or harder than they should be, just remember, this is not a content problem, it's a clarity problem. But the good news is that you can take action today to build the clarity that you're seeking. All right, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to grab that template of my personal brand hub, as well as the audit you can use to audit your own personal brand today, find those gaps, and try Adobe Acrobat Studio for free for 7 days using the link below in the show notes. I'll talk to you soon.